hot mic questions. Okay, good.
Okay. I think this is working. Good evening. I'm Morris Foster. I'm president of the School for Advanced Research, and welcome to today's Humanities Festival event. This is our first event at the New Mexico Military Museum, and we're happy to be here. It's a very nice facility. So thank you to the board of the museum for their generosity. Before I introduce our featured guests, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors who've made this event possible. And as we always do, we begin with Anonymous, Andrea Fisher Fine Pottery, As Above, So Below, Dan Marians of UBS Financial Services, Fay Creative, the Flora Crichton Lecture Fund, Founder Society members, the Luke and Betty Vortman Endowment Fund, the Patricia G. Foshi Charitable Fund, Shiprock Santa Fe, Thornburg Investment Management, and Zaplin Lampert Gallery. Before this, they challenged me to read it backwards, so maybe next time I'll do it alphabetically backwards. I'd also like to recognize members of our board of directors who are here tonight. Thank you for your ongoing commitment and support. Events like these are made possible by the generous support of our donors and members. If you would like information on becoming an SAR member, please visit our website or talk to one of the staff after the lecture tonight. They'll be outside. Now I'd like to introduce our two speakers tonight who actually are in conversation. Patty Limerick is a professor of history, the director of the Applied History Initiative, and the campus partner for academic affairs for the Veteran and Military Affairs Office at the University of Colorado at Boulder. She is the author of Desert Passages, The Legacy of Conquest, Something in the Soil, and A Ditch in Time. She served as president of the American Studies Association, the Western History Association, Organization of American Historians, and the Society of American Historians. As vice president of the teaching division of the American Historical Association, and as a member of the National Council on the Humanities. She received a MacArthur Fellowship in 1995 and was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2021. Professor Limerick has dedicated her career to bridging the gap between academics and the general public and to demonstrating the benefits of applying historical perspective to contemporary dilemmas and conflicts. Shelly Lowe is the newly appointed president of the Institute of American Indian Arts. She was chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities from 2022 to 2025 after serving on the National Council on the Humanities for 6 years alongside Patricia Limerick. She has served on the board of the National Indian Education Association and as a trustee of the National Museum of the American Indian. Lowe's career in higher education has included roles as executive director of the Harvard University Native American Program and director of the Native American Cultural Center at Yale University. So just to remind you, please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices at this time, and please welcome Dr. Shelly Lowe and Dr. Patricia Limerick.
I thought they turned it on. We have to turn that on here. Hello. Am I audible?
Hey, we got her on.
It's better turned on than off. That's what I am really going places in technology now. So, but I was assured that people who know what they're doing up there were doing things, so that's good. That's all I need to know about technology, are people up there doing things. So, okay. Hello.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I know that it's difficult to convince yourself to be out this late at night. Oh, wait, that was the time change. It's actually not that late. But it is difficult when the time changes to be in the dark and be like, okay, I'm supposed to go to this event and I'm tired. But you guys all made it today, and we're very happy that you're here. Patty and I want to be in conversation a little bit with all of you to talk about our work in the humanities, particularly how we did a little bit of overlap with the National Endowment for Humanities, but how we've come out of that experience understanding what it really takes to do work in the humanities and what we need to do for ourselves, like laugh, in order to deal with the work that we've done in the humanities. So we hope that you enjoy a little bit of conversation. We will have some time for questions after we have our conversation.
So I worry about higher education and the humanities, and I am convinced that Shelly and I can rescue the humanities.
She's been convinced for a while.
And the part that there's some decision makers in work these days, we can't do too much about them, but we can, I believe we have it in our reach to rescue the humanities from some self-inflicted inadvertent injuries. And by that, I mean that, well, I'll go particularly for academic humanities people, but it varies a little bit. But there is sometimes a temptation. PhDs are a big pain in the neck to get. And when you have the PhD, you kind of want to parade that around, and you want people to know that you went to a lot of trouble to get your credentials. And so that can cause people to be more dismissive than there's any reason to be of people who are working hard in the humanities who may not have PhDs and the full set of credentials, and that's not good. That doesn't help the cause. It's an all hands on deck situation. So to have the status, some other time for that, but not now. And also, alas, the pride of having made it endured a humanities PhD program is that there can be a temptation, which is easy to resist, but you can have a temptation to arrogance, pomposity, self-importance, impenetrable jargon. I could name names now, but it would take the rest of the evening, so we're not going to do that. Which was just a very mean thing to say. I don't know why I said that mean thing. I'm really not a mean person. So it is an unfortunate thing to see some of our, some of our most determined practitioners losing audiences, confirming stereotypes of remote and irrelevant academic specialists, creating barriers, people who create barriers and separate themselves from others. So that caused me, as you might imagine, that caused me to think of what happened to the Wicked Witch of the West. Oh, was she of the West? Well, I can't recall. Yeah, anyway, so, but you recall that she was, Dorothy took care of her by throwing water on her, at which point she melted. Remember that part? Yeah, so, okay, so for academics in the humanities, the stereotypes are easily dissolved of us as remote, distancing ourselves and setting off status boundaries and all. And just how do you get that dissolving of the unfortunate stereotypes? You simply throw a dash of humor on that. Now, that does not mean that we dissolve and melt away the way that Wicked Witch did, but that those stereotypes do dissolve, they do melt, and that's what we are here to work on, is how we are going to save the humanities from some of the practices that arose maybe for very good reasons, but are now deeply unproductive. And humor is the root of rescue.
Yes. So Patty
us.
has this idea that we're going to save the humanities, and I said, no, Patty. We're going to teach everybody else how to help us save the humanities together. Okay. So Patty and I met each other as we entered our positions as council members on the National Endowment for Humanities National Council. And Patty and I, our kind of trajectories have overlapped in little bitty ways, but we wouldn't figure this out until later. The process to get confirmed for the council is very lengthy in many cases. So we were starting the process about the same time, but unaware of each other and unaware of that we were both being nominated. We hadn't met each other before. The process goes through the normal course, which includes about filling out 200-something plus pages worth of vital information about yourself, your background, your family, your travels, your finances, everything. The government knows everything about us. And you do all of this work, and you sit and you wait, and you wait, and you wait for someone to bring you onto the congressional floor to be voted on. And it didn't happen in a timely manner, and our paperwork expired. So then you have to do it all over again. You have to decide if you want to do it all over again. Do you want to continue and try to get going again? Thankfully, Patty and I both decided that we would go ahead and do this again And, you know, all of a sudden, one day we get these phone calls, oh, you were confirmed, congratulations. And then for me, I was like, I have no idea what that means and what is going to happen now, but here we go. So I ended up in Washington, D.C., and I ended up in a hotel not at all in any way, shape, or form close to the NEH offices. And lo and behold, my other former council member who was confirmed with me at the same time is in the same location, and we're there to do our orientations together. And I have to say, I'm completely clueless. I didn't know what NEH was. I didn't know what the work that they did was. I looked up the definition of humanities. I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. And then Patty walks in, or we go into our orientation. We had one other council member who was confirmed with us, but she couldn't make it that day. And we get inundated with information about what the agency does, how the work happens, getting ourselves used to it. And I start thinking, okay, this is gonna be fun and I'm gonna learn a lot, and oh my gosh, I feel intimidated. But I have to say, I was so relieved that there was somebody from Colorado, from the Southwest, because I had spent all of my time, for about a dozen years or so in the Northeast, so removed from everything in the Southwest. So I thought, nothing about this can go wrong. It's going to be awesome.
Well, and I want to reminisce a little bit about the ridiculousness of being interviewed by the FBI, which what possible information we were going to have that was going to be precarious. That was so I had a nice woman who came and interviewed me, sat in my living room, and she said to me, now I have to ask the question, how many times did you smoke marijuana? And I said, well, I went to UC Santa Cruz in 1968, so we can assume there's a number there, but I didn't really take to that. So I don't know that I can answer that question exactly, but I'm going to say 6 to 8 times. She writes down 6 to 8 times, I think. Oh no, what will happen if she talks to people who were at Santa Cruz with me and it was actually 19 to 22 times or something, who knows? So I said, oh, please don't write that down. Please don't write that. I don't know if that's true or not. So then 2 or 3 years pass and the next FBI person comes and he gets through the form and then he says, oh, here, I have to ask you, how many times have you smoked marijuana? And I start to think, oh, excellent, we're starting. He said, oh, it says it right here. It says 6 to 8. This is going to be in my New York Times obituary. This is really going to go with me into eternity. So it was many moments of comedy in that. I had my own notion, I think I'm going in the right direction here, that I had become concerned about the state of humanities and the presentation of self that some figures in our field had taken. So as a graduate student, I guess I had been inspired to think, it's a long time ago, maybe I could help with this absence of humor and self-inflicted performance of authority that doesn't necessarily convince. Anyway, so I thought perhaps I could do something. And what I thought I could do went really well. It's still going well to this moment, actually. It's not doing much for the humanities when I think about it, but it certainly did a lot for me. I declared myself to be the official fool of Yale University in the Shakespearean manner. And really, the only person, well, there's that other guy, but who sticks with King Lear is the fool. And the medieval understanding of the fool, it's one of the greatest traditions of Western civilization, other cultures have versions of that, is that the fool has to speak freely to authority. And if you don't let the fool speak, and you do something very bad, like exiling the fool or cutting the fool's head off or something, that is endless bad luck for the kingdom. So that is a wonderful tradition, that you have to have a fool and you have to let the fool speak. And so I declared myself the official, well, it was a little bit complicated. I applied to be the official fool. It was auspicious because the president at that time was Bart Giamatti, who was a Renaissance literature scholar. So woohoo, there's an inside track, except that he then wrote me. I was saying fool or jester at that point. So I get a letter from President Giamatti, who does not accept my application. And he says he is both president and jester, and he would be reluctant to give up the role that gave him the greater pleasure. So somehow, for reasons that steps and stages I cannot fully recreate, what do you know, that ended up in the New York Times. So there was an article in the New York Times that said, given how many people are qualified for the position, it is surprising that no one until now, has applied to be the official fool of Yale. And I had stopped using the word fool, so there's poor President Giamatti claiming to be both fool and president. He said he got more letters of complaint from angry alumni than he got over what he was trying to do to stop apartheid in South Africa. That I don't know how you're to measure that out. So I kept going out in regalia, whiteface and regalia, and making it clear that I was the official fool, and making it clear that President Giamatti was never seen in whiteface or that colorful regalia. So finally, I just thought, this is going on too long. I'm working on an analogy of monarchies and royalties. We don't have that in the United States theoretically anymore. So I decided to declare myself the fool. The democracy is the land of the self-appointed fool. So I sent a letter to President Giamatti declaring myself the fool. I was there for a couple more years. I then got a job at Harvard, and I submitted my letter of resignation to President Giamatti, and I said I had enjoyed serving as the university fool, but I was going to go to Harvard. President Giamatti accepted my resignation. Why would you ever accept a resignation from someone who didn't hold the job? So I think that's the confirmation that I was the official Yale fool. Then he could not resist it. He said that I had served Yale well, but he was very eager to write a letter of recommendation to me, for me to Derek Bach at Harvard, and he wanted to do that because he felt that Harvard needed my services more than Yale. So that went pretty well. I ended up meeting President Bach. I had not planned to meet him on this occasion, but I was in regalia with whiteface. I said to him, I would like to be appointed Harvard fool. He said, this will be the end of this long narrative here, but he said he didn't think he could do that. He wasn't sure. Harvard has an extremely elaborate process for appointment, and you would have to convene all the noted fools at Harvard and get their approval of my candidacy. And then they have that, what is it called, an outside board or something? So we would have to get the most distinguished fools from universities around the country, and so it would take quite a long time. So I said, well, I still think you must consider that. And then he got on another track and he said, I have already appointed a great many fools at this university. I said, now we have to clear that up because you were talking about closet fools, and I am the first open air official fool to apply. He said, I swear this is what he said. He said, well, now you point that out, my closets overflow with fools. So, okay, so some time passed, and he did have a beautiful ceremony in his office, and absolutely wonderful write-up, which is available if you'd ever like to see it, appointing me as official Harvard fool and giving me the power to observe that proud community through my revealing mirror. And he is no small f or capital F fool, because what he did was he waited until I was 2 months away from leaving Harvard before we had the ceremony. So now I'm the official fool at the University of Colorado, and it goes well. But it's a pretty good way of saying, did that damage my career to take this public stance of a full embrace of humor? To seize that, could I have been a more successful Western American historian if I had not gone to Jack's joke shop and bought clown makeup? So I hoped I was setting an example that you do not need to go that route of portraying a very credentialed and solemn person. There's all kinds of alternatives. Boy, did that take forever. So I arrived at the National Council on Humanities. I don't think that appeared on my forms. I don't think it was anywhere on my forms. Are you now, or have you ever been an official fool?
Not that I know of.
Probably should have been on everyone's forms. There should be something on those forms that say, do you have a robust sense of humor, or would you acquire one before you go to Washington, D.C.?
Right.
That would be appropriate.
Yes. So Patty comes, and it's my first time at this national level on a council, and I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I fit in? How do I work with these individuals? They seem so impressive after our background check, of course. You know, they've got to be great people. And I'm a little bit overwhelmed. When Patty talks about, you know, I don't understand what this word is. I've never seen it before in my life. We'd read through these application summaries, sometimes full applications, and I finally had to get a dictionary app on my phone because I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. So I'm intimidated. But I think, you know what? These guys are all really professional. They're all great. This is going to be wonderful. I had been on boards before that were really dysfunctional in many ways, and I was just so happy to work with people who could be professional, who are getting jobs done, right? Because this is a national position. And so our very first meeting with our council, which we have a public meeting and we sit and there's all kinds of cameras and there's people sitting everywhere and we're all being recorded. And our chair at the time, Bro Adams, says, okay, we're gonna get started, let's get going. And I'm so used to being on these native boards. We're sitting all in this room and we're all in this big kind of square, almost horseshoe-shaped table. And I immediately start to get up to push my chair back because I'm like, okay, we're gonna start with a blessing, right? And I catch myself right before I stand up because nobody else is getting up. Nobody else is moving. They just start going straight into business. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. You know, I didn't cause like some kind of delay and people being like, what is she doing? All of a sudden standing up. So this is a totally different experience for me. But we've got Patty, the former fool. And so as we start to go along. Patty the fool.
I got rid of the
Sorry.
term. I had term limits at the University of Colorado as the fool, but those are gone now. I'm there for eternity.
Patty will always be the fool. So we've got Patty the fool. So I'm starting to figure out, right? Sometimes you watch people, how they get along, how they interact together. Especially we would be put on committees and it get a little bit, you know, mixed up sometimes in who we were working with. So you got to know people. And Patty became somebody who the other council members and staff gave a nickname. And she was the only person who got a nickname on the council. The staff were always so very cordial, professional with the council. They always deferred to them. You know, everything was about the council being in the office. And all of a sudden, Patty had a nickname. And I thought, you know what? We do this in Native communities. I think these people are okay. I think this is a good place and we can get this work done. But I'll let Patty talk about her nickname because it's her second nickname.
I have,
She had one before.
Right. Okay, so I never go anywhere without this.
Which she never did in our council meetings either.
Gone on for a long time. And Lynn Cheney, whose husband just passed away, Lynn Cheney was the chair of NEH for a long time, long before we were on there. And the folklore, which I heard from several sources, is that if my name appeared on a proposal for a documentary or a public program of some kind, chairman, she would say, Cheney would always say, if Backpack Patty is on that, we're going to need a couple of conservatives to balance that out. So that was my nickname, and
that was her
kind of
nickname
proud
before, which we didn't know about, but she always had her backpack.
I did.
And all of a sudden, so Patty was one of these people, she took her role very seriously. We were new, we took our role seriously. We were trying to figure this work out. What we are allowed to do as council member is flag applications for either they were recommended and we had questions about them, or they weren't recommended for funding and we had questions about them. What happens when you flag an application is everybody on the committee has to read the entire application, right? So Patty starts flagging away. And she doesn't stop. And it gets to the point where at one committee, what did you do? Like 11 flags? And so the committee members had to all read the full 11 applications. So we get committee books sometimes that are like this. But that's just the recommendations and the summaries and the lists of things. Then Patty flags things. And there's like a stack that comes to people. And they were starting to get so frustrated with Patty. And somebody finally said, flagging Patty has to stop flagging all of these applications. So they figured out a review process where when somebody wanted to flag a lot of applications, the program director would call them up and say, let's walk through this first. Let me answer some questions for you. Thanks to flagging Patty.
I don't recall getting one of those calls. I guess they knew that
we started after she was gone.
Oh, that was my heritage. I will say that when I resigned, when I was removed from replacement of the Trump person, there had just been an impeachment attempt, and who was the fellow who was Beninsky, the heroic fellow Army officer, who he had spoken and given a topper. He said, I guess he was speaking to Congress, and he said that his father, who had brought him and his brother from Poland, had worried that this man was speaking out against the President of the United States. And this man said in his testimony, I said to my dad, you did the right thing. You brought us to a country where that's not going to be a problem. So I quoted from him in my parting remarks to the NEH Council, and I did not get friendly looks from the Trump appointees with with that. But I was so glad I could make that statement because all the man said was that, Dad, you brought us to a great country. Well, okay, so that was an interesting experience to have all that happen.
We also joined the council at kind of what seemed like the height of this conversation that the humanities are in such dire situation, right? There's nobody majoring in the humanities anymore. The numbers are low. The departments are being closed, shut down, not funded. And so this conversation keeps percolating, right? What are we going to do about the humanities? How are we going to support the humanities? Always such an awful, like, negative story, right? Oh, the dire situation of the humanities. And I kept thinking to myself, well, they're not saying humanities is in crisis, right? And I'm Native, and I've been on a lot of boards and worked in a lot of areas, particularly Native education. And we always talk about Native education is in crisis. So I thought, they're fine. We're not in crisis yet. Let's just keep doing the work. We can keep this going. But as we've learned, that conversation and that argument and that idea about humanities is dying has clearly not changed much. It's a lot of what the news outlets like to look at and what they really like to focus on. But, we're just starting in our ways to understand what is it that's happening? How are we starting to think about this? And then Patty and I go out. We're not on the council anymore. She's been doing some really great work at UC Boulder, which she's going to talk about. And I go into being chair of the NEH. And I start to learn even more about what it means to do work in the humanities. And this is where it gets to the point where we say why humor is so important. It took me about 6 to 9 months. One of the chair perks, but also part of the job, is being on the ground, meeting organizations that we have funded, talking to community members, talking to a lot of the programs and partners for our state humanities councils that we've working with. And every site visit I would go on, every museum I would visit, I was visiting like the most traumatic stories in history. I was walking through just trauma after trauma after trauma, awful history, things that have happened in this country, right, in these communities, whether it was Emmett Till, thinking about Emmett Till, every single visit had some kind of negative, horrific history in the United States, being told through an exhibit, being told through community conversations. And it got to the point where I had to stop and say, okay, how do I deal with this? Because a lot of these stories and a lot of these experiences, I was learning for the very first time. I grew up in Navajo Reservation. I grew up with a limited kind of education that I didn't get exposed to a lot of things. And many of this I had never been exposed to before. And I kept trying to think, what am I going to do? Because it was just like, oh my gosh, we are awful. And I don't know how we're supposed to talk about the humanities as a good thing that we need to support and that we can use to strengthen who we are as, citizens of the United States. How am I going to do that?
So
we'll talk about what Patty figured out.
Right. So lucky me to have been president of the Organization of American Historians just when Congress had mandated a 50th anniversary commemoration of the Vietnam War. I was president of this large organization of historians. The DOD did not get off to a great start on that. They didn't have historians working on this project. They launched a website that was not well thought out, or was just a timeline without much. It would say Congressional Medal of Honor received, My Lai incident, Congressional Medal. It was just chronology. It was not anything that put anything in any order of what was happening there. So I decided I would try to help with that and see if we could get a better operation. I had friends from high school who were killed in Vietnam. I didn't want to just be passive with that. So lucky me, I found an officer who had just taken a retired colonel, about to retire colonel, and he became my partner, and we had a really great time getting this in better operating order. That caused me to go to think, I need some allies on my campus so that we can be campus partners for this. And so I found a wonderful person at the Veteran Military Affairs Office, and I became the campus partner for the Veteran Military Affairs Office, and that has been an extraordinarily great opportunity. And the Global War on Terrorism, well, that has left a lot of people with difficult memories and experiences. So I have been very privileged to spend a lot of time with student veterans. And from that, I have learned a lot about how having difficult experiences is completely compatible with high-powered storytelling and with humor. So, and being in this museum is just a great honor for that. So I'm going to tell a couple of stories. I will just say that, say there was a competition where I could get a lot of money for a good cause if I could be dropped down on a campus, and as fast as I could, there would be other competitors. I would have to find the most adept, skillful, energetic, robust practitioners of storytelling with powerful humor in that. I would think, I've got this. Where's the Veterans Office? Where's the Veterans Office? So my student veteran proteges are remarkable in that. And I'll just tell the one story where I thought, okay, I think I'm catching on to this. It was right after Veterans Day, and I said to a group of the student veterans at lunch, what'd you all do for Veterans Day? One of them, name names, but one of them said this was a hard day for him. A year before, he had separated from the military just before Veterans Day, and he'd had his first grand mal seizure. And that has been clearly recognized as service-related injury. He inhaled a lot of exhaust and burn pit stuff and so on. So I was very, I was knocked over by that. And so I'm absorbing that. Meanwhile, the other student veterans, his pals, his comrades, one of them says, not very long past, a couple of seconds past really, and they have assessed the fact that this person is still with us. He's the wittiest person among us. So they've made that, they've crossed that divide there. So one of them says, well, there are worse things to do on Veterans Day than have a seizure. And I think, what? Why did you say that? And then I get the whole thing. This man is with us. He is very energetic. He is a force. He is really thriving in the university. So, okay, let's think about that. So that's where I just have had such a sense that if you want to find the place on a campus where the greatest strengths of the humanities, energetic, perspective, exploring, storytelling, and humor, if you need to find that place and you need to find it fast, maybe skip the departments and go straight to the Veterans Office. And that's not separated from the issue of trauma in the least.
Right.
And it is all about resilience and refusing defeat. So I don't know quite how these years would be going. Haven't seen the best side of university leadership in some circumstances, but I have seen the best side of universities. And I'm actually now really eager to do whatever I can to have universities around the country build robust relationships with history departments and veteran centers, because that is just the best conversations we can have. So, okay, so trauma and humor.
Right,
Well,
and learning how to deal with the information that you're being confronted with that is extremely negative, and just, in any, I would think, normal person would just be like, oh my gosh, I've had enough. I cannot be confronted with this anymore. So Patty is over here working with veterans and figuring out how to really revision and rethink experiences and how do you move forward from there. And I'm still trying to figure out what in the world am I going to do? I keep having to go and see these really awful, histories and learn these really awful things that I hadn't learned before. One in particular, we had gone to Arkansas and we were in a town called Wrightsville, and I learned about the Wrightsville 21, which I had never learned about before. So 21 young men were burned alive in a school that they were locked in overnight, right? This is the separate but equal. Their school is most vocational, and and it was just like, I had never learned this. Why was this never told in the history books? How come I'm just learning about this now? So trying to come to terms with all of this new knowledge, all of this understanding that why doesn't everybody know this? But if everybody knows this, how are we going to move through it? So I have one example of how, in one instance, the staff and I really started to figure out, we went through this kind of a traumatizing exhibit, but we ended up on the other side in a really good way. So I had done a talk for Creighton Club in Columbus, Ohio last month, and this is a part of the talk that I did. So, part of my job was to make sure that across this country we keep memories alive, right? Memories alive from communities, from history, from events that have happened. But in October of 2023, some of the staff and I were in Indianapolis for the National Humanities Conference. I wasn't on an official site visit for that conference. We were kind of generally in the area for the conference, but even when I was there for another event, we would kind of call up some of our grantees and say, oh, the chair's in town, can they come over and come over and see the exhibit that we funded? So I took time away from the conference to go to the Indianapolis Children's Museum. In the fall of 2021, the museum opened the world's only permanent exhibit featuring Malala Yousafzai, who became the 4th child in their featured exhibit, The Power of Children Making a Difference. So this is a very, very popular exhibit. So the NEH staff who were there with me, they heard that I would be going over to visit the exhibit, and so many of them were like, can we come with you? Can we join you? And I'm generally one person that says, yes, come on, let's go. So we've got 3 or 4 or 5 different cars full of people going over the Children's Museum. And we're going into this large room to experience this new exhibit. And it's a very interactive exhibit. So, most of us know the Malala story. She grew up in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. Her father was a teacher. He ran a school for girls. And Malala was taught very early on the importance of education, especially for girls in Afghanistan. But the Taliban, as you know, did not believe that girls should be schooled, and they shut down the school for the girls, and they banned them from ever receiving an education. But this didn't stop Malala as a young girl. She continued to go to school. She continued to speak out vocally for girls' rights to an education. She wrote a blog under a pseudonym for BBC Urdu. And the Taliban, of course, came and tried to silence her. They threatened her. They threatened her family. Her activism and public profile had made her a target. And in October of 2012, a masked gunman boarded her school bus and shot her. So the exhibit, we're sitting in a room, we hear and see this entire story play out. We can hear her father's voice. We can hear her voice. We hear the threats against her. We hear the gunshots, and then we hear the aftermath. And it's all playing out on video and sound within this room. And the room is decorated kind of as her school desk and a little bit of her home. We hear about her recovery. We hear about her continuing to speak up and advocate for girls across the world. And it's extremely, extremely powerful. Most people walk out crying because that's how powerful it is, but also with really, immense gratitude and just in awe on how well the exhibit was done. So the staff and I walk out, right, and we're all very emotional and wow, they did such a great job. Look at what our funding did. What an awful experience. And for a child, right? So there's all these emotions going through all of us. So we continue walking through the museum with the staff, and we come across another exhibit. And I said, so you guys have an annual haunted house? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about this. Because I was like, well, this is cool. It's a children's museum, and they have a haunted house. I really like that. I was also trying to be like, okay, we went through this emotional exhibit. Just tell me about this haunted house and what's going on here. So I learned that there's a Children's Museum Guild, a group of amazing and dedicated women, all volunteers, who spend thousands of hours each year making the Children's Museum Guild's annual haunted house. Right, so this is my first time learning about this. The first haunted house opened in 1964, and they have been doing it every year since. It's their largest annual fundraiser, and it goes to raise funds for families and communities throughout the year. In their history of having this in 61 years, they have brought in more than 3.3 million visitors and donated more than $17 million from this exhibit. So I'm thinking, wow, this is a really great example. How do I take this and kind of tell other museums that, check this out, this is a really cool thing you can do. So there's 2 things about this haunted house. It offers 2 scare levels. There's the friendly hours for kids, right? Who scare easily, and then they leave the lights on and you can walk through the scary parts, but not have the lights off. And then there's the frightening hours for kids and adults who want to be scared. So, I hadn't really thought about this when I asked. I'm not a big haunted house person. I don't go out of my way to go to haunted houses. But I said, well, can we go through it? And they said, do you want to? And I said, yeah. So I said to the staff, we're going to go through the haunted house. And some of them were like, no, we're not going through the haunted house. And then the rest of them said, the chair's going through the haunted house. You need to go through the haunted house. They take me very seriously. They take that position very seriously. So they all pressured each other, and they said, okay, we're going to go through the haunted house. You cannot say no to the chair. So we go in, and they said, do you want friendly or frightening? And I said, oh, we want frightening. We're going to do this. So we made our way through the passages, and extremely scary things would come out of the shadows. They would touch us very lightly. They would swing bloody weapons at us. They would get in our faces with gore and horror. They would whisper things to you. My staff was screaming. We were grabbing onto each other, and everybody was laughing. There was some very surprised cussing. Shh, don't cuss the chairs here. There was some pleading to please hurry up and get through this. When is it over? Because it was pretty much pitch black until something came out at you, or you got into a room and you were just like, I cannot do this. We could barely see each other, but we slowly made our way through, clinging to each other. But when we made it through, there was actually one of the, oh my God, I think I peed myself. And of course that made us all laugh even more. But when we finally made it through, it got to the point where all of a sudden we were a whole new team together. We had experienced something that was probably 15 minutes, but we felt like we had survived something extremely major together. And I would reflect on this often to say, we did survive together. We got through something scary. We clung to each other. We made sure that we took care of each other. And it was like the work that I do at NEH. I was continually confronted by scary, awful, anxiety-inducing things and stories. But because we're humanities, I decided we were the front lines, right? Those of us who do work in the humanities, we are the front lines. And we are the ones that are going to protect everybody who's with us and everybody who's going to come behind us. So I told everybody, you all get gold stars because we made it through and you all agreed to do it. And then we took a picture and it didn't really come out, so we don't even have that anymore, sadly. But it was one of those ways to say, okay, it's going to be hard, it's going to be scary, but we can do it and we can do it together.
Well, I want to take this as an occasion to apologize for that crabby remark I made at the beginning about all the people who were not using their full powers. And I want to say that I have the most conflicted, it's quite a dramatic thing to see, when I am sitting and looking at an academic written product that does not have the vitality that I know that the author has and could be using. I will go on a tear of dismay and condemnation of the academic world. Then I go to a conference, as I just did with the Western History Association, and I am just knocked over by the vitality and charm of those authors. So I think the rude remark I made about, there's lots of names I could mention, I would like to say this is systemic. This is a training process that takes very engaging, lively people and puts them through a training process that makes them very cautious about being their full selves. Now I know this because I had Andrew W. Mellon Foundation gave me a very sizable grant to work with young people who are historians, recent PhDs, about to get PhDs, and to help them retool as applied historians, as people who can go outside the usual academic conferences and talk to regular people. So amazing thing to see. When they would come to our program, they would give a presentation, an early presentation on their work, and it would be a very conventionally prepared academic talk to give at a conference. And then we would do different things to say, that's one way to present it, but it's probably more. In some cases, we did when you fold up a paper to be a fan, I would and fan yourself with that, I would put the topics they had covered on different pieces of paper and well, on the same piece of paper, folded up, and then have them, since they knew all that stuff, they could speak it, but instead they were reading these properly academic written things. I'd hand them that document and I would say, just look at one line at a time, and it would be the opening story they had told. They could not look at a full manuscript, they just had to look at people. So the difference there was astounding. And humor came back into it, and the full human being was there talking about the lives of human beings who were no longer able to speak because they were dead. And so that whole notion that a historian lends her life energy to the people of the past to bring them back in, you can do that. So as much as I made that grim little remark at the start, I want to take that back, and I want to tell a funny story, because that's one of the things that I have found is that you can make a serious point much faster if you just tell a story. So this is about the Supreme Court, which is not a very funny subject right now, but this was a funny story from several years before. It could still be funny, I guess. So, okay, the little boy is taken by his father to see the Supreme Court in session, and he has to sit quietly. He's been told to sit quietly, and so he sits there, and it's quiet, and then a fly comes into the chamber and buzzes around, and then it lands on the forehead of one of the justices, who brushes it off. And the little boy is very excited. He grabs his father's arm and he says, "Did you see that? Did you see that? One of them's alive." So that, I think, is the key of so many students, for instance, who are not history majors, or maybe some who are. The people of the past seem like they have been always dead. They were maybe 3/4 dead when they were alive, or theoretically alive. So to say those people were living on the edge of the present just as much as we are now, once you have that, you have what you need. But you can't get there by what is a pretty set piece of conventional academic training. And yet, the splash of humor and most of that can dissolve.
Right.
So that's what I think is really very encouraging, is that we have an amazing talent pool, and they just need to have the doors open, that you are a full person and you don't have to conceal that when you are speaking to others about your work. So humor, I will say, has helped me in so many circumstances where okay, so one of the things, this is a new one that I've been trying to figure out. As a nation, we're not doing so well on, kind of tedious term, causality. What really caused what? We're far more inclined to jump to blame, and finger pointing is usually the thing. So I found, I have a secret copy of a book here that is the cure for the humanities, the dilemma of the humanities. And it turns out we share loyalty. I'm concealing the book here. But this is a pretty small book here, and it put in the hands of humanities professionals, it could change everything. So one of the stories I found in this book, I hope you're getting pretty desperate now to know, what is this book? What's the book? And she'll tell you.
Yes.
But I won't tell you. But I will tell you the story that I found it, and I thought, this will work. I've been using it to ask students, but also any population, to think with more intensity about how they decide what caused what, or who caused what. Okay, so it's the story from this book. So a farmer, it's Easter, and the farmer gets kind of an idea, pretty fun, might try it. So he goes into the hen house and he takes out all the white eggs, and in their place he puts colorful Easter eggs. And it's just gonna be a little funny Easter prank. Then he leaves, and then the rooster comes in. And the rooster looks at these hens and his nests and the eggs, and he's just in a rage, and he races out and he beats up the peacock. So that was a failure of causality.
Yes.
And the peacock certainly has the worst of that story, but the rooster is not impressive in that, as you may have noticed there. So that turns out to be a great way to raise a serious discussion of how do we know what to blame. And so this book, which I will show in a moment, I was delighted to find out that we share a warm feeling. Okay, so I'm ready to show it,
So
but not just yet.
there were quite a few, I mentioned at the beginning, there were quite a few ways that Patty and I have overlapped, but in different time spans. right, so Patty was at Yale for a little while, and then I came to Yale. Never did hear about the Fool while I was at Yale. Then she went to Harvard, and then I was at Harvard. Didn't hear about the Harvard Fool either. I've seen pictures. You have to find one of those. It's very fun. And then we were together at NEH, and then we've been having conversations over the years about this idea, right, about what do we do about the humanities? How do we help? We have figured out that we're not training people correctly in the humanities. And we're not, I said this at a conference, I said, we don't communicate humanities to the public. We just don't. And that's why people don't understand that humanities plays a role in your life every single day. We use it all the time. It's extremely important. We just don't know how to communicate it because we just take ourselves way too seriously. So we started to talk about this talk and how are we going to, bring humor in. And of course, some overlap that Patty and I also have is that, how have we thought about humor in the past? Or kind of looking at how difficult facts about history have been communicated in ways that made people rethink them. So we would talk about Vine Deloria Jr. and how he would talk about history and the situation of natives and how non-natives would kind of look at us. We would talk about Charlie Hill, who was a comedian, and the work that he did to really kind of put in people's faces some of the ideas that Native people had about things that have happened over history. And then I said, and you know what else I used to do? My mother was a librarian, and so there were always magazines in the house, my house and my grandparents' house. And I said, when I was growing up, I would always take my grandparents' Reader's Digest. And
laughter is the best medicine. Reader's Digest compilation.
The only thing I read were the jokes. Because I knew somehow I got introduced to the jokes in the Reader's Digest. So every time they got a new one, which they would often put in the bathroom, right? So I'd have to take it out of the bathroom and be like, I want to go sit over here and read this. I would go through, find all the joke areas, the cartoons, and that's the only thing I ever read in the Reader's Digest. And Patty said, Reader's Digest? I used to read Reader's Digest. So we decided that Reader's Digest is our tool and our cure for our problems in the humanities.
Well, really, get one for every humanities professor. Laughter is the best medicine. That's a very fine one. The best one actually is Humor in Uniform, which is a whole other thing in itself. But my goodness, what a treasure trove. And if you have an important historical thought that you want, an interpretation that you would like to get around, there is a story in here that will make that happen. And I will use, actually this is not from Reader's Digest, but it's a great one to get at the dilemma of people who are caught in the academic world and can't think their way to freedom. So, okay, so there's a writer, he's an academic writer, and he works really hard, really hard, and he goes to heaven. He's passed away, I should say that first, I guess. But so he is dead, and he goes to St. Peter's Gate, and St. Peter says, well, this is really a problem for us. We don't know what to do. You're just right on the borders here. And we think we should, well, we don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you hell and heaven. We can make a choice. That should be easy. So they take the academic writer to hell, and there are people at desks, and they are writing as hard as they can. They're writing and researching, and they're being whipped by devils, and it's terrible. So he doesn't want to do that. So then they go to heaven. And same thing, they're at desks, they're working really hard, they're striving, they're trying to get things done, they're finished. And the angels are tormenting them and pushing them and saying, that's not, you're not doing this fast enough, you have to work much harder. So then the writer says to St. Peter, I'm just not following this. I'm supposed to choose it. These are both terrible things. What's the difference? Is there a difference? And St. Peter says, well, yes, there is a difference. In heaven, you get published. So that's a better way of saying we might want to rethink this driven custom here of just doing that. We might want to do it, and I know that I want to make sure that we do you mentioned Vine, and I think we have to go there because yes. Vine Deloria Jr., when I made my comment about the preeminence of military people and humor and storytelling, I stand by that, but the other sector of the population, well, plenty of sectors, I guess, but another one is Native people. And Vine Deloria Jr., who was my colleague at University of Colorado for 10 years, he was, I believe it's fair to say, America's leading Indian intellectual. And he had Did he have a robust sense of humor? Well, yes, he did. And he wrote a book, Custer Died for Your Sins, in chapter 7. We use some of those quotations in our meant for this, but he says in chapter 7, Indian humor, one of the best ways to understand a people is to know what makes them laugh. Laughter encompasses the limits of the soul. In humor, life is redefined and accepted. Humor, he writes at the end of that chapter, all Indian people will agree, is the cement with which the Indian movement is held together. When a people can laugh at themselves and laugh at others and hold all aspects of life together without letting anyone drive them to extremes, then it seems that that people will survive. So that's Vine. And I had the incredible privilege of having Vine make fun of me very effectively. It's a little bit shooting fish in a barrel to make fun of me. I mean, it's really not that hard. But here's what happened in a very intense, speaking of, I mean, basically our point here is that there's a common notion that we should steer clear of humor because we are dealing with so many serious issues. And this notion that humor is not going to be, is not right. It will trivialize, it will not do the right thing. Well, my personal feeling, and I think I'm siding with, Vine would be okay with my saying, we should avoid humor only if we want our troubles to get worse. It's in our power. So here's a story that my first husband had a bad cardiovascular situation, and Vine Deloria was very fond of my late husband. And so when Jeff was in the hospital with a stroke, when he got out, Vine said he wanted to take Jeff and me out to lunch. Wanted to be the first ones to take us out to lunch. I was very confused. I was really so burdened with the whole situation that, well, Jeff couldn't drive, so I drove Jeff to the wrong restaurant. And then when I walked in there, I thought, this is not where Vine is going to meet us. So we had to repair that, and he was very kind and changed his plans and joined us at this other restaurant. We started late. For the rest of Vine's life, every time I said to him, well, we should meet and do such and so, he'd say, Dr. Limerick, Dr. Limerick, you tell me you're going to go to that restaurant. Well, what restaurant are you actually going to go to, and where are you telling me to go? And so we would always do that. You're telling me to go to that restaurant. Well, where are you going to be? So we did that over and over and over again, which, okay, fine, I'd asked for that. So then Jeff Limerick, my late husband, and Vine Deloria died the same year in 2005. They were very fond of each other. And I wanted very much to go to Vine's memorial in Golden, Colorado, but I had made a commitment to speak at the University of Portland. So I was there, and when I got there, they said I couldn't go to Vine's funeral, but they said, oh, by the way, we've looked at our schedule, and we see that our Plains Indian course meets tomorrow morning, and we were hoping you could speak at that. And would you talk about Vine Deloria's heritage? I said, oh, yes, of course I would. So that's what I did. I went to a class at the University of Portland to talk about Vine, and do a tribute to Vine. At the very same time, everyone else was going to Golden, to the memorial. So I walk in there and I think, oh, for heaven's sake, Dr. Limerick, you have gone to Portland, Oregon. And everyone else at the same time is in Golden. To this moment, I just think, well, that was a great blessing. That was really an honor. And, well, that's what I think is what we must steer by, is the people of the past, as Vine is never of the past, he'll always be of the future and present as well, but those people gave us a heritage. A new friend just sent me an article he'd written, which is so illuminating. It's in the Western Historical Quarterly. I missed it. He has found a bunch of people in the 1840s and 1850s, members of Congress, all kinds of people, who decided that they thought manifest destiny was a terrible idea. It was unjust, it's unfair, it's wrong. So instead of, they denounced it, they did that, but they also made fun of it. They also frequently wrote things that just made a parody of manifest destiny. So that, for me, reading that article just a few days ago, I just thought, oh, I thought the humor thing was historians, humanities people, saying things about subjects we study, but in fact, the people of the past are ready to join our team and to guide our team, to say, you know, we were not humorless ourselves, and if you see the things that we wrote about manifest destiny, you are going to change your whole view of the nation. Instead of what the textbooks tell us, the American people, a lot of textbooks give the indication manifest destiny was the spirit of the times and people were all falling in line with that. No, there is a very significant sector of brave people, and note that they chose that powerful tool, by some arguments the most powerful tool human beings have, to challenge manifest destiny by showing how ridiculous it was. So that was, I packed everything I wanted to say into that, so your turn, and then
I think what Patty and I have decided, well, Patty's decided we're saving the humanities, right?
Yes.
And I said, well, I think we've decided that we're doing humanities wrong in terms of how we prepare individuals to do humanities work, and that we definitely have seen us kind of self-inflict these issues onto ourselves. How do we get people to rethink and think outside of this kind of restrictive humanities box that we have kind of all gone along with for a very long time? Right. So one of the things that we hope you walk away from is that works like this are humanities, but a humanities scholar is never going to tell you that.
Yeah.
Never, right? That these things happen on the ground in communities all the time in ways that humanities scholars are not going to call humanities scholarship or humanities work. But this happens, and it's everywhere. And our job now is to identify where those things are happening, is to draw attention to the work that's happening, and is to say this is humanities work. It is strong, it is alive out there, it is important, it is being used every single day. Humor is a part of it. I tell people all the time, what's the difference between science and humanity? In humanities, we can actually have jokes and humor. And then I said, okay, scientists can probably have jokes, but you know, the science is not what's funny. It's them understanding something and having this humanities moment with themselves. So, right, so we know that this is the case. We know that this is what can happen. And now our task to you all is to join us and to figure out how we pull these humor resources, how we pull these tools into the work that we do to draw attention to how important humanities is, and to break down some of those real kind of pedestals that we've put up there that really kind of safeguard where humanities has been and continues to want to be. But if it does, we're going to all be planning the memorial service for humanities, which in some cases we decided was going to be okay, because what happens at memorial services? You get together, you tell stories, you laugh, you connect with people again, you connect with new people, right? And it becomes humanities work all over again. So we can do it. We just want you to help us. And we want to open up to questions.
Yes, and we want to say that was perfect. What you said there was perfect.
Yeah.
That's
our
somebody
task.
just, yeah. Questions? Here you go.
I got to ride in my father's car in Denver when I was 5 years old. We drove out onto the Stapleton runway with his car.
You got on this,
What's
you were
that?
driving on the Stapleton runway?
Yes.
You should not have done that.
Yeah, you're right. And out of the plane, he was comes in full drag, Bozo the Clown, stepping down out of the plane and into the back of the car with me. So Bozo the Clown is one of my spirit guides. But another one is Swami Beyondananda. Now, if you haven't heard of Swami Beyondananda, you can find him all over YouTube. He's got books and whatnot. It's this Jewish guy who wears a turban, and he calls himself Swami Beyondananda. He's actually quite good. The only thing I wanted to share was one of his thoughts recently. We don't need a revolutionary uprising. We need an evolution. We need a evolutionary upwising. And that's just all I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. It was great.
I guess this is on a little different vein, with the current administration and what they are doing to history and et cetera, how do you find humor in that?
There was a really good, one of the pieces that you read or were talking about earlier. So people, I stay very positive about humanities, clearly. And people have always said, how do you stay positive with everything that's happening and all the attacks on everything? And in one instance, I just said, look, it's all been let out of the bag. It's just not going back in. We just can't go back. We've always gone forward. You don't have this choice. I told this to Patty one time. There's no going back. You have to keep stepping forward. All of this information has already been shared. It's not like it's going to be forgotten. I mean, there's going to be attempts to make it, be forgotten and to try to make sure it's not told. But I think there's too many of us who already know. Too many of us pet the cat, and we really like the cat, and we're just not going to put the cat back.
Well, what a great question, and I do think, by the way, that closing comment, the memorial service will be its own demonstration of the power of the humanities, and so it goes on. So I am so fortunate to be with these young folks who served in the global war on terrorism, some of them deployed, and the withdrawal from Afghanistan was such a nightmarish phase for them, because that was a bunch of folks whose lives had been transformed with a pretty clear statement of no one knows why they did, no one knows what they were fighting for. If they lost friends, they don't know what they died for. So I think I am kind of removed from saying life is just intolerable and I don't know how we can take it. I do think humor is, I think the kings, no kings thing with all the goofy creatures, all the frogs, and that seems like a pretty good thing. It's just, it is so interesting to see how people with no sense of humor can present a vulnerable flank that may take some time for enough strategies to come to play that. But it's not good. To be a humorless person is really not good, and I think we do have a whole bunch of them there. And that is eventually not going to be working for them. Does that mean that they will ever, well, I don't know. Maybe this is so odd. I do have such a ridiculously cheerful personality. I don't know what to do about that. So I can see a sort of Paul on the road to dismay. I can see getting the right person with the right joke at the right time, or not joke, because that's too, but the right moment of looking in a mirror and thinking, what has come over me? Some of those people, if they could see how ridiculous they look and how unfair it seems for them to be. I did write my first limerick about ice today. Thank you for the occasion here. So I can't see a golden age. I think Manifest Destiny inflicted, the people who put that into action inflicted unbearable suffering on many people from that, and that was hard. Would humor have changed that? I don't know, but the people who left the record of denouncing and mocking Manifest Destiny, they're still here to inspire us. That's where the fact that they have passed away is irrelevant. Their words live on. We can say, okay, I mean, if I could do that, I would just say, okay, America, pause, whatever you're doing, United States, don't do anything until you have read this great article about people making fun of Manifest Destiny. Now you're ready. Now you're set to take on these problems. So is that ridiculous? Yes, it is a little bit, but that's the whole point. Ridiculous is fine. Then we can, okay.
And I had been in Atlanta for a visit. We visited one of the institutions, and they talked about, and this happened fairly often when I went to museums, that they had certain panels with content that their school groups were not allowed to see, right? So the particular panel was LGBTQ history or events in Atlanta. The students were not allowed to walk by that, so they would have to take them kind of around. And it was kind of like, well, then they're never going to be introduced to this history or to these facts in the city. So what the institution did was, when you walk into the actual museum, there's a exhibit in the front that goes all the way around, so you have to walk through it. And it was highlighting the major LGBTQ figures in Atlanta. Very large kind of signs and billboards. So it didn't matter if you weren't allowed to see it, you were going to see it. And there was just no way you were going to miss that part. And the other thing that happened while we were there for National History Day. If you guys are not familiar with National History Day, look it up. It's absolutely fabulous. Students do these history projects. And in the school district, of course, their laptops were set up where they couldn't look up certain words because they couldn't Google certain topics, right? So what did they do? They just went home and did it on their home computers. And they submitted their projects on these topics anyway. And so this is one of those experiences where I say we can try all we want, but I think we have the information out there and we have these new access and tools to be able to get at that information in ways that we weren't able to before. So these young people are doing it anyway.
Well, and I will say one of the greatest lessons I ever learned is about teaching. So I had a custom in the big lecture class. I would have some prepared letters ready to, as I'm walking around the room talking, I could stop by the front and pick up one of these letters in an envelope. These were for people who, for mysterious reasons, they had come to class, they were kind of sitting in the middle of things, and then they would suddenly get up in the middle of class and leave. And you think, well, what are you doing there? I don't know, is that a protest? What is that? So I had these letters and envelopes, and they said, hi, and I would try to get them fast, walk down the aisle there and get it to them before they left the room, and it just said, I'm not understanding what's happening here. I don't know why you're leaving. I would like to understand. When I was a girl in college, we sometimes walked out on speakers, and we probably shouldn't have done that, but is that what you're doing now? Was that a protest? Why are you leaving now? So I had this, please come tell me why you are not thinking you should stay. So I walked down the aisle and I gave that to one student who was leaving. And a student who had not been particularly engaged, he raised his hand a minute or two later, and I said, oh, good, you got a question. He said, what's in those envelopes? So I said, I do not want to take everyone's time by reading this, but if you want to come down afterwards at the end of class, I'll tell you what's in the envelopes. So I did not do that. I did not tell him. Probably 40 people came down to find out what was in the envelopes. So I thought, this is astounding. If I tell them stuff, well, she said that. Right. But so this little thing, I'm not gonna tell you what this is. I mean, that's a little bit of that. People get so much more interested if you say, you can't know that.
Yes.
Well, so this whole program seems designed to use this great teaching technique. Yeah. To say, oh, I was gonna tell you, oh, wait, I'm not gonna tell you that right now. So I love that aspect of human nature. I didn't know that for a long time, that you can put young people of any age, really, into a frenzy of curiosity if you say, oh, there's something I was going to tell you, but not now. I don't think I'll do that.
No, you don't need to know right now.
Right. So I would say that the censorship and the squishing is actually probably building up a real head of steam of what are they concealing from us? What could we know? No one's going to dare ask a question given how substantially.
Thank you. I would like to join the gentleman down here to move a little bit more to a definition between the ridiculous and dark humor. And I was just thinking, my wife and I have talked several times about people, we were both teachers, professors. What do the students know today? And I was thinking about, well, we've got J.D. Vance, who once said that Trump was America's Hitler. Yeah, well, right. J.D. must be America's Himmler. How many people among your students would know what the hell I was talking about?
Oh, there's a problem, yeah. Well, that's an interesting problem. I had an episode many years ago where I understand I should never have done this, but I said something about something being a Procrustean bed to a class. That's a pretty interesting notion that you tailor a person to cut the feet off, that's what you have to do. Well, everyone looks at me in complete bewilderment. I thought, oh, that's not going to work anymore. People of my age, for a while, were going, well, everyone remembers where you were on November 22nd with the Kennedy assassination. Well, no, they hadn't been born. It turned out that was a problem for memory. So I think it's an act of kindness to say, good heavens, there's a lot to know. The darned humanities professors have just been turning out books, and every textbook needs to be. So I think it's time to be compassionate with that. Plus, they know so many things that we don't know. And that's where I feel like the technology thing, which you started with that, I feel very fortunate that I have to depend on young people to help me with things in technology. I think it's great to have the shoe on the other foot there with my saying, could you tell me exactly how it, go through that one more time? I click on this, and after that I do. So I would like to have more reciprocity of what do you know that I should know. But I guess I feel, because I am struggling to keep up with things, I guess I feel a little bit of compassion. And I suppose, I hope this isn't wrong, but I think that Himmler may not be the key to saying J.D. Vance has gone down a terrifying road. Saying that may be better than going for this is something that reminds us of a really bad set of, bad is too mild a term. So I guess I'm thinking, I'm not sure I ever thought it was particularly easy being young when I was young. And these folks, I mean, what a world to be navigating in. So maybe it's more dialogue of just saying, can I interest you in a historical fact that you might find illuminating? And would you be okay if I told you about that? And then would you be okay to tell me whether that seems valuable to you? So just that intergenerational dialogue. I mean, that's what is so great about the student veteran work and the applied history work, is that I am just having the most utopian experience as an ancient person, just with all these young people who are just saying all these things to me. I think, well, I wouldn't have thought of that. So I just wonder if it's okay now to just say, it's a very disorienting world. I'm not doing great at understanding it. And what a nice time to say to young people, can I tell you about this, and can you tell me if you think it's helpful?
Right, and I would have said it goes both ways, right? So I was so intimidated coming into NEH because these council members were talking about all these things, these books, these theorists, these scholars that I had no clue about. I had never been introduced to any of that information. And then I started to realize, well, one example, we helped with the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, do the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. And we let the council members know that this was work that we were doing. And I can tell you a number of our council members said, I never knew this history before. I have never heard of this before. Mm-hmm. And it was like, what? How have you not known this history ever? You're somebody who grew up in the United States, a school in the United States, didn't know this history, right? So it's one of the things that I find the most amusing. It's the staunchest humanities scholar. When you tell them something that they don't know, because they all think they know it all of it, all of history, every scholar, every theorist, they all think they know it all. If you tell them something they don't know, they get so perturbed. Oh, they don't know how to you can just see them. It's in their head, it's stuck now. And they walk away, and you know the first thing they're gonna do. They're gonna figure it out. They're gonna inform themselves about what they don't know. The other problem is, a lot of times, we don't know what we don't know, for the most part, until it's introduced to us, right? And it's our job, I think, in the humanities to be open to being introduced to the things that we didn't know before, and to be open to learning about it. And then our job, like I said, is to make sure that we're sharing that information and we're getting that knowledge out there.
So I think I've tried to be very careful about adopting things from other people's cultures, but one of the things that was lasting for me was attending a program on boarding schools and having a Yakima woman there who had lost her language in the boarding school but regained it and was teaching Yakima children the language. And she said to us, as if this would be so obvious, for a bunch of us are teachers, of course we would know this. She said she never started working with a Yakima child until she had said to the child, do I have your permission to teach you? And when she said that, I thought, now that would explain some things that have gone wrong in my life. Where there I am. I have some stuff I'm going to tell you, and no one has said, we're on board with that. So I don't quite know exactly how to structure that into our operations, but I suppose that's one of the things I've always liked. If you make a nice overture to someone and they are dreadful in responding to it, you didn't want to be around them anyway. So if you say to a young person, here's something that I think you would find a really interesting aspect of European history, and I want you to know these names, and they say, I don't want to learn that. Good luck, young person. Good luck going through life with that. And maybe they will come around and just that. But that phrase of, do I have your permission to teach you, is sort of a, and would you be interested in teaching me in return, is even better than that. One of my young scholars finally helped me understand who was who in the Mexican Revolution, which I've only tried to understand for 50 years. And then this young person just finally says some stuff to me. Oh, that's who Carranza was. And so it is really great. And it's worth, sincerity is a great quality. We like that. But it's worth a little bit of dishonesty or insincerity or whatever to, when a young person tells you something of value, to treat that as something that you had never encountered or thought of, and to thank them earnestly for that. I think more of that reciprocity and more receptivity comes from that. Plus, as you say, we go through life and there's just too much to know, and the notion that you can say, oh, you just pointed out my ignorance, I'll always be in your debt. That's an appropriate, and it's funny, but it's true.
Right.
So, okay. So,
and well, in closing, I had a Harvard student, Navajo student, who graduated and said, I'm so upset. And I was like, okay, you just graduated Harvard, what's wrong? He's like, I went through 4 years here and I tried to get to everything in the Widener Library, and I will never be able to read all of the material that's in Chinese. And I said, you're a humanities person. I understand. Some knowledge we just don't have access to until we find the way to figure it out.
Well, please join me in thanking Patty Limerick and Shelly Lowe for a very entertaining and amusing evening. And as a fellow childhood reader of my grandparents' Reader's Digest humor section, I appreciate that memory. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beg pardon? The magazine. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's the Western Historical Quarterly. It's 2016. The author's name is Daniel Burge, B-U-R-G.